life in a foreign land. You are no longer sensitive to the nuances of the national situation in any immediate sense. This was one of the matters discussed in a very perceptive manner in Dhaka, Bangladesh, during the last 3 days, at a seminar which was convened by Her Excellency Sheikh Hasina, Prime Minister of the People's Republic of Bangladesh. And I had the honor of making a keynote address on that occasion and being the lead speaker in their session on counterterrorism. Now, the representatives of many countries, particularly from the Horn of Africa, made the emphatic point that this was very much a feature of their own empirical experience, a disconnect. Right? Now, the diaspora, I want to emphasize, is no longer today in the Sri Lankan context a monolith as they were during the lifetime of Prabhakaran. At that time, the diaspora was a monolith. There was only one point of view emanating from the diaspora. That is hardly surprising, because anybody who dared to express a different point of view could not expect to be alive much longer. But today, in the new situation, there are varying nuances and gradations within the diaspora. And there is a segment of it that is in touch with the Defense Secretary. Some of them have met me. I think some of them met Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa very recently as well. And they are by no means averse to investing substantially in the north of the country, not for any political purpose, but simply through a genuine desire to contribute to making life easier and better for their people in those parts of the country. So that is one aspect of the diaspora. It is very much there. But we would be deluding ourselves if we did not recognize, in a spirit of candor, that at the other end of the spectrum, there is another point of view. There's also a segment of the diaspora which, quite candidly, has not recognized the irreversibility of the military defeat of the Tigers and entertain within their bosom some hope and expectation that it would be possible to breathe new life and vitality into this movement at some time in the future. That is also there, and to ignore it would be to deceive ourselves. Now, what is happening now in some countries abroad? I would say that the only thing that is happening, the objective remains the same. I want to emphasize that I'm not generalizing about the diaspora. I'm talking of a section of it, an unyielding, relentless, inflexible section of it. Now, as far as that section is concerned, it is only the modalities that have undergone a change. And I need to say this in a very straightforward manner, and I don't hesitate to do so. That is, it is no longer feasible to carry on this struggle through suicide missions, through arms, guns. That's not possible. That is ended, and that's never going to happen again. However, what we are now facing is an economic onslaught against Sri Lanka. The object of that is to undermine the economy of Sri Lanka, to dissuade investment, to reduce volumes of international trade, to persuade tourists to boycott the country, and by adopting these means, to strike at the root of an economy which is today vibrant and growing at the threshold of approximately 8%. So that is an economic war against Sri Lanka. It is a kind of war. It's not a war in the physical sense, but it is a war in a metaphorical sense. Now, what are the causes of terrorism? One cause, not the only cause, and in the modern world, in my view, not even the most important cause, but one cause is dire poverty, deprivation, economic exclusion. Now, we are genuinely proud and legitimately proud of the fact that the northern province is growing at 22%, the economy, when the average for the rest of the island is about 8%. There is infinite capacity in the north. You go to Mannar, it's a green field, the thriving paddy fields. Then fisheries from Point Pedro, Valvatitore, that whole area, Nagarkovil down to Elephant Pass. Fisheries is today a thriving industry. There are also mineral resources in the northern part of the island. Cement in Kankasanture. The Paranthan factory, which is being developed rapidly by the government. There are salt urns which can generate a great deal of wealth. The two state banks in that part of the country, the Bank of Ceylon and the People's Bank, have been specifically instructed to give a large number of loans to the small and medium sector with a view to generating employment and ensuring the percolation of economic benefits down to the grassroots level. So that is the economic revival which Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa spoke of. Now the effort on the part of the groups that I am talking about is to strike at the very heart of that throbbing economy and to rekindle the embers of terrorism by following the route of economic distress. Now at that point I want to tell you that important and relevant though economic considerations are, it would be quite facile to imagine that that is the sole cause of terrorism in the world today. University professors, engineers, doctors, lawyers, all these people have become terrorists in different parts of the world, not through economic deprivation, but the causes in those cases have to be sought elsewhere. Now that is why a sense of togetherness and inclusivity in the body politic is absolutely essential to ensure that our country never goes through the travails and the tribulations that afflicted us during the last quarter of a century. This is why His Excellency President Rajapaksa has a very firm and logical view on this matter. When he met the 10 members of a British parliamentary delegation last week, and when he addressed newspaper editors also last week, I was present on both occasions. President Rajapaksa did not mince his words. He said emphatically that attempts in the past to resolve problems connected with the political process failed because they came from the top leadership of the government. What he wishes to do in order to ensure implementation on the ground is something basically different, to consult with people, to ensure that these thoughts and insights and perceptions emanate from all sections of society, an inclusive dialogue, rather than the government imposing its will or trying to do so. It is that approach that has failed during the last decade. So what is required is a spirit of inclusivity. The instrument for achieving that inclusivity of approach, indisputably, is a parliamentary select committee in the Sri Lankan constitutional and legal context. We have to address the future. What are the reforms that are necessary? But those are reforms that must be acceptable to a wide swath of the Sri Lankan community, embracing different ethnicities, religions, and cultures. Must be acceptable to everybody. Now, what I'm about to say is very important. This is one of the reasons why we genuinely and profoundly regret the attempts to internationalize this situation, whether in New York or in Geneva or elsewhere. Because those who try to do this forget a very important consideration. Once you do that, you are really putting unnecessary obstacles in the way of, in the path of moderate forces in this country. Today, we hear statements from extreme groups saying, they're raising their voice unabashedly, saying, why are we worried about a domestic process? The international community will give us more. So let us appeal to the international community to get directly involved in these situations, to breathe down the necks of the government of Sri Lanka, to impose their will on the Sri Lankan government. That is the way to get the maximum. Now that is to denigrate a local process. But at the end of the day, there can be no conceivable doubt that the future of this land, the constitution that is appropriate for this country, the legal system that we desire, these are all matters in respect of which decisions will be made within Sri Lanka and nowhere else. It is absolutely inconceivable, given the circumstances and the history of the Sri Lankan situation, that the international community would ever want or be able to impose a solution upon us. That is for the elected government of this country. Now, the pity about it all is that those who internationalize this or who want to internationalize it put us on agendas, then encourage the hope in extreme quarters. Okay, let's go that route. And this means that the only viable solution that is possible will simply be forgotten about, will be delayed, will be relegated to the background. That is not in the national interest. So this is a major reservation about attempts to internationalize issues connected with the Sri Lankan situation. Now I will conclude with some remarks. The effort of the government and indeed the people of Sri Lanka today is to ensure that we learn from history. This is a land bountifully endowed by nature in every possible way. And among our principal strengths is the uniquely high caliber of the human resources of our country. We owe it to our people to ensure that these resources will be fully exploited in the future without the pain that we have had to endure for the last 30 years. And the government of Sri Lanka, under the leadership of His Excellency President Mahinda Rajapaksa, is very sharply focused on identifying our objectives and also identifying a trajectory that will carry us forward towards the accomplishment of those objectives. We consider three things to be fundamentally important. One is the spirit of togetherness, inclusivity, which is a sine qua non. We are focusing very sharply on language. Now I am speaking to you now not as the country's foreign minister, but as an educationist, somebody who has spent 26 years of my life educating 2 generations of Sri Lankans within the universities of this country, and also somebody who has had some experience of teaching abroad. Now, language had a lot to do with our problems, because language resulted in the creation of artificial barriers, the stratification and the compartmentalization of our society. If you have young people in the Sinhala community not able to converse with their counterparts in the Tamil community, neither side able to speak to each other, because the Sinhalese don't know Tamil, the Tamils don't know Sinhala, and neither group is really comfortable with the use of the English language. Now that was different from the situation when I was an undergraduate student in the University of Peradeniya and the University of Colombo in this country, because we made friendships on the basis of shared values and interests. And we were not overly conscious of ethnic identity. Today that is no longer the case because of this difficulty in communication. In order to address that, President Rajapaksa embarked upon what I consider to be a very exciting and timely initiative, which we describe as a trilingual capability initiative. And on that occasion, he invited the former President of India, Sri Abdul Kalam, to come here to this country, because Abdul Kalam had taken an interest in these issues throughout his career. So in December last year, President Rajapaksa, with the association in that ceremony of Dr. Abdul Kalam, inaugurated this very exciting initiative. It is also the effort of the government of Sri Lanka to ensure that public officials serving in the northern part of Sri Lanka have a working knowledge of the Tamil language so that they can relate better to the people